keep it alive through these lines I write. I keep it live cause I thrive. I might just blow your mind tonight. I'm so hyped, but it's no hype. From this height, it's direct hits on sight. I'm your type, lend me your ears to show you that there's something in me. I'm not giving up, I'm standing right here, holding these days hostage. And I'll make this my year. We turning fear into love, and the love's in the air. I love doing this cause nothing compares. Nothing can share that same type of feeling when you feeling and flare. They can't catch it, it's havoc. I rip to a tear, switch the scenario. My stereos, I leave them impaired. Variables start to change and they're all in my range. I just gotta grab it, it's all mathematics. Every step is drastic, I make it fantastic. I'm trying to take your breath away. Asthmatic.
This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo.
Yeah, just nod your head with it. So explicit and vivid. Every image is intricate, intimate. I put my all into it. No scrimmage and no rules. I'm a pro tool. Hear my heartbeat beat into the vocals. I'm so loco, lost my mind, oh no. It's ponderoso, dope, so no overdose, cause it's dope, yo. Man, this is house grown, mixed with some milestones. So I let the style flow down like the Dow Jones. Bringing it with some foul tones, letting the crowd know we getting loud, so it's eardrum rudiments. Yeah, we bring it rude again. Move, little hooligan. Music for tuning in, full time to the 10. I'm on my clock like I told you. I'm doing this for dreams we pursuing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anti-Media Radio Show, once again with your host Nick Bernabe here on UCY.tv and the antimedia.org/radio. Really happy to be back. Yes, I'm alive and well here on this Monday, October 2nd, 2017. Welcome to October, everybody. One hell of a welcoming party. A lot of stuff happening. Obviously, the first thing we're going to go into is this mass shooting in Vegas just last night. They're saying it's the biggest mass shooting in U.S. history. Of course, that's only if you're looking at recent times, because there were some crazy things that happened a long time ago. But regardless of all that, bunch of developments, a bunch of just questions we still have, motives. We've had this talk before. This isn't anything new. I mean, mass shooting after mass shooting after. There's mass shootings all the time in the United States, and everybody's looking around, asking questions, wondering why, pointing fingers, and sometimes it's people try to blame Muslims, sometimes people want to blame guns, sometimes people want to blame white people, sometimes people want to blame racists, sometimes people want to, there's plenty of blame to go around, right? And I think one of the more profound radio shows we had a while back after one of these nasty shootings. I don't remember which one it was. Like I said, they happen so often, and they kind of start, blending together at this point. And this one stands out because of how gruesome and how many kills and injuries there were. But I think the underlying principle here is not gun culture. So, you hear often on CNN. It's not that white people are predisposed to go shooting up crowds. It's not the fault of Islam. I even saw people Alex Jones trying to blame Antifa. I mean, come on, dude, get real. I personally think it has more to do with America's underlying violence issue. And of course, mass shootings aren't unique to the United States, although they tend to happen here quite often.
Well, Nick, what are we founded on? What is Wounded Knee? I mean, what did our founding fathers do to make Manifest Destiny a reality and continued to push it all the way into World War II? I mean, is it any question why these problems come home to roost? By the way, I talked to a guy that knew this shooter. He was friends with him from 2004 to 2007 in Mesquite, Nevada, and he said the guy was totally normal. He's definitely a liberal. He didn't own a gun when he knew him. He didn't know how to shoot one. He said, of course, something could have flipped, but he also said he started, from what he heard from friends of friends, is that he started hanging out with this lady that they now are connecting him to, and she's from the Philippines, and he wired a whole bunch of money back, apparently. So it's going to get really deep. It's going to be a wild ride. There's going to be a lot of propaganda. There already is, and I'm sure we're going to try to disseminate through some of that tonight.
Yeah. Of course, there's going to be a bunch of details. A bunch of details have probably been messed up, and we're going to have Justin King on in a little bit to talk about some of the inconsistencies here, because there definitely are some. I'm not going to go too deep into the fine details here, but first. Yeah, what I was saying, dude, and you're right. This country was kind of founded on violence, you know. It's got a long history of violence, from the genocide of Native Americans to the enslavement of Africans, and to the brutal existence that we have right now that Americans seem to be okay with. I mean, we got cops. Now we got cops literally marching down the streets, killing 1,000 people on average every year, as of, since I started paying attention to it. I guess like 2013, 2014, you start seeing all these cop killings. It's probably been just as bad before that too. Just we didn't have the smartphones around to take videos of it when it would happen. So there's been attention on it recently. Sorry. We got this war on drugs, which is unbelievably brutal. I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't talk. The NSA's got my windpipe. The war on drugs, which has been unbelievably, brutal. You got this massive incarceration state. You got this war on terror. You got the fact that the U.S. has been involved in like all these wars, and of course we've still got like imperial territories like Puerto Rico, which we're allowing to kind of just fester right now, and people are just dying left and right over there. I don't even want to know how many people have died in Puerto Rico. The most recent thing I read today was that half of the people there don't have access to drinking water. Half.
And it's such a calamity, dude, because there's blame to go around on all sides. It's real easy to think it's the current administration or the past administration or even the corrupt governor of San Juan. But in truth, I've heard that people are not showing up to do truck runs because they're afraid of gangs on the roads that will pull them out and kill them. That's what I've heard. So that's what happens when there's natural disasters. Law and order breaks down because there's not enough dudes with guns to go out and control a population. They can barely protect the government.
Yeah. Our government is a government that quote-unquote solves problems with violence. Everything in the world that happens, America goes around and tries to solve it with violence. Whether it's North Korea or Saddam Hussein or bin Laden or the issue of terrorism, which is a tactic, we declare war on it. We declare war on drugs. The United States is an unbelievably violent place, and the underlying foundation of it is unbelievably violent. It's an empire. It's an expansionary empire. It was founded with those colonies, with the British, and it expanded to include what it is now. I mean, it's an expansionary empire. We committed genocide against the people who were here before them. And this is exactly why I'm not surprised when this kind of stuff happens. I mean, I've written about this time and time again. Every time something like this happens, I say the same stuff. Maybe you guys are tired of hearing about it. But
we're in free fall, dude. I mean, if this event doesn't prove it, if somebody doing this kind of mass casualty event doesn't prove that, one, they can't protect you, and now I've heard that they're going to be bringing into these basically everything you go through right now to get into a plane, you can be sure that'll be for hotels and casinos, especially in Vegas. So that's the end game, and whoever owns stock in those machines is a millionaire right now. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. So yeah, dude. I mean, I'm not going to be surprised about these attacks happening until the U.S. addresses its underlying culture of violence. And I mean, that's deep rooted. I mean, we're not even going to get rid of that in a generation. It's going to be generational change to a more peaceful society that solves its issues with dialogue and conversation and genuine understanding of other people, not just tossing people in jail, locking people up, cops marching down the street, killing people for, being black, among other things, going around the world declaring war and invading countries, not even declaring war, but just invading people, bombing them, flying drones on them. How can we be surprised that some dude's going to go shooting up someplace? Who knows where it's going to be tomorrow? How can we even be surprised when that's the culture that we live in? I mean, even in school, even children get hit by their parents for not doing what they're told. I know that's starting to change. It's becoming less acceptable to hit kids. But come on, dude, when we raise a culture of people that are hit by their parents for not listening, what do you think these people are going to grow up and be adults? How do you think they're going to act? When they have trouble, when they get depressed, when they're like, you know what, screw it, I've had enough. They want to commit suicide. Why? When they're mad at the world. Why not? I mean, why wouldn't they go and start shooting stuff up when that's the way that this country works? When stuff goes wrong, you bomb people, you kill people, you shoot people.
It's just blowback, man. When empires collapse, and we're part of the UK-US empire, we're the British-American empire, whatever you want to call us, after we barely made it through World War II. We were joined at the hip after that. So this is what's happening, man. We've overextended ourselves, and it's been a long run. And I'm not going to say that this guy is not a lone gunman, because there's not proof, but there's enough eyewitnesses out there saying that there was multiple shooters that it makes me think that this was not just this guy getting sad, that they used him as a patsy. And they do this when there's desperation or when they're trying to make a power play. And I see desperation, man. I see a collapse in our economy imminent. They're doing everything they possibly can to do whatever they can to make us not see every day the supermarket's getting more expensive. And if you don't believe what's happening in Puerto Rico could happen here just because the banks don't work the next day when you wake up, you're kidding yourself, because that should be prepping you for what you need to do for your family. I mean, this in Vegas, man, if they clamp down and martial law and you can't even go out and get food, how are you going to make it through? You got to start thinking these things out now.
Yeah, so, this is just, to me, it's just this natural... a natural reaction in the United States where when something doesn't go your way, you lash out violently. Because that's that's the way we're raised. That's the way we're conditioned in school. We're treated that way by our parents. Most people. The government treats us that way. Our military acts that way. And so it really isn't that much of a surprise when this kind of horrible stuff happens. Now, the problem is we're getting everybody wanting to politicize this thing immediately, and it's like, okay, well, a bunch of people are dead, and this is really sad, but hey, let's inject our politics right into this, and let's start throwing around
immediately, dude. There's still people fighting for their lives.
It's so sad to see this kind of crap happening, dude. And of course, Hillary Clinton chimed in. All the gun control people are spouting off. I'm seeing all kinds of these just weird, outlandish political, these political opinions coming out, trying to use this as a trampoline to jump their ideas into into the conversation. But nobody's addressing the bigger problem here, which is this violent culture, dude. I mean, it's so patently obvious. And these kids that go around shooting up schools and committing these just mass acts of violence and stuff. I mean, this is not the way things are supposed to go. This is not how people are supposed to solve problems, but this is how we've come to solve them, being the world's sole remaining empire, is through violence. That's the main tool of an empire, is violence. And that's basically all we do. That's all we do. And so when this kind of stuff happens, we're not going to fix it with political solutions. We're not going to fix it with, let's ban guns. And so the next attack can be done with black market weapons, or with illegal weapons, or with a rocket launcher, or with a grenade, or with an acid attack like they're doing now in Europe because they can't get their hands on guns as much. People, when they want to carry out acts of violence, they're going to find a way, whether it's a hammer attack. I mean, you heard about the stabbing rampages that go on in China. I mean, people carry out mass acts of violence without guns, too. Not to say that a criminal can't get his hands on a gun, because they can, obviously.
It just expedites it. That's all it does. It expedites it, and it makes it easier. But, I mean, they'll use a truck, they'll use a car, they'll use a knife, they'll use acid. I'm sure that they're at this minute cooking up some way to do poison. And that's the thing that freaks me out the most, Nick, is somebody crazy poisoning food randomly. I mean, I could see that happening. And what do you do? Test every food you eat? You can't. So, I mean, we have a big problem of evil in this country, and people breaking down mentally, because everything from the top to the bottom and every facet oozes evil here. I mean, we built a country on the graves of a civilization, of a people, of a culture. We just killed them and slaughtered them out, and then we just kept it going. We kept it going down into South America and then all throughout the Pacific. And we still haven't stopped. We're just still doing it today in different parts of the world. Nobody even knows. Nobody even knows what we're doing halfway around the world with 216 military bases, or however many we have, and 60 or 70,000 drones. I mean, do you people not really think that our budget of $4 billion on just jet fuel for the Air Force isn't going into something?
Yeah. I mean, where's it going? It's a good question. So the latest on this dude is they found 23 firearms at his hotel room and 19 firearms at his home. So he had 42 guns, apparently. They're still saying that he's a sole gunman. And so, I don't know.
We'll get Justin King on, who's had five eyewitnesses corroborate the stories that I've gotten from other things I've been reading, which is just that there were gunmen at other hotels. There was a gunman at Paris. There was a gunman at the gift shop. There were supposedly armored people that were just keeping elevators free so people couldn't respond, and the guy would just be up there glee shooting. And then I also watched one video where I counted 280 rounds being released. So I don't know how many rounds were released in total, but it might have been a magnitude of 3 or 4 times that amount, and it easily explains the numbers. I mean, I can't imagine a guy doing that. I mean, how long was he up there? I mean, how many minutes did he have? It doesn't make a lot of sense with 2 windows broken out and then muzzles from the 4th floor. It looks like it was 3 people, and that's called triangulating your shot, and it calls a kill box or something of that nature. Maybe a Marine. Is Justin King a Marine? I don't know, but maybe he knows what I'm talking about. When you have 3 lines of fire, it makes it so you can't miss. So it makes it pro, and it explains kind of the carnage. You know, I don't think that guy could have done that. I'm sorry. I just don't see it in that 64-year-old man.
Really weird, man. It really is. And the guy's brother was kind of taken back from this too. He said the guy had a few sidearms, but didn't say he was a gun fanatic.
The guy's father was wanted in the FBI, right?
Yeah. I guess the guy's dad was a bank robber, randomly. 42 guns, though. I mean, that's not a, that's not an amateur collection. That's kind of a gun fanatic collection there, right?
That's like a perfect guy to use.
Yeah, I mean, it's very strange. But I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of times when these kind of things happen, there's always a big pushback, because most times people are saying, okay, well, where's the second gunman? Because it's pretty hard for one guy to take care to kill all these people by himself. For instance, with the Sandy Hook thing, which of course I don't want to get into that, but many people were saying, okay, well, there's got to be another shooter. Couldn't have done it all on his own. And that's the same thing people are saying about this guy, and many people who are witnesses there also think that there was more than one shooter. I talked to somebody today who happened to be about a block away from where the shooting happened, said that they heard several locations of where the shooters were at and all that. So the people, the investigators are pushing back pretty hard, saying pretty confidently that it was only one shooter. But there's very, very much conflicting reports here. So hopefully, if we can get Justin on, he's got some information for us. I don't know if we're going to be able to get him on, though. He's having trouble with Skype, so I don't know if that's going to happen, unfortunately. If not, we'll try to get him on Wednesday or something, because obviously we need to have some expert opinions here and some eyewitnesses and people on the ground that saw what happened, heard what happened. The person that I talked to today was saying that they heard gunshots from at least 2 or 3 different locations. And, when you're watching some of these videos, you can actually hear what sounds like 2 separate guns going at the same time. And I doubt the dude was standing there with a gun on each shoulder shooting at the same time. I really doubt that. I think if everybody's jumping for conspiracy theories, everybody's jumping for false flag stuff, I don't really want to get into that, because I don't believe that stuff unless there's very good evidence for it, and right now that stuff doesn't exist. But maybe people can start putting some evidence together of at least, maybe we'll find out that there was more than one shooter. I don't know.
There's evidence, but it's just, the problem is it's people that are doing Periscope and stuff, and it's a lot of confusion, and you haven't had anybody tie together different eyewitness accounts with people filming stuff in different locations at different times. And a lot of the time, a lot of people were saying, well, what if SWAT was being confused for gunmen? And I was like, yeah, that's totally true. Like, gunmen, they could say, oh, there's armored gunmen, and they were just SWAT, just trying to clear a hotel. So I have no idea what happened. The thing that bothers me every single time is these guys just never make it to jail, dude. And it's too convenient, and it never adds up, and it doesn't make sense. This guy getting depressed like this and doing all this stuff doesn't make sense. He was wealthy. He was having a hell of a life. He had planes. He was that kind of guy. So it just, these things don't make sense, man. It's too convenient sometimes when all these facts add up, like who the guy's father was, how his brother has no idea what the hell is going on, how, dude, these things don't make sense. It's like the guy that shot at Scott Scalise. Remember the guy that all of a sudden he becomes a Modern Warfare like VR player and unleashes 100 rounds on people like he's trained? Like, these people are not trained. People would know if you were like big into guns and you were like really knew what you were doing. People would know. Your own friends would know. You would let it slip. You couldn't secretly be like training and keeping up totally normal appearances. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's really strange. However, at the same time, we have to be really careful about, buying into or spreading unfounded conspiracy theories, because when we do that, we do a disservice to the people like Justin King, to the genuine researchers and journalists out there piecing this stuff together. Like you were saying, all this stuff on social media, that there's a puzzle that can be put together here. Someone's going to be working. People are working on that right now. But for people to, like Alex Jones, coming around and say, oh, it was this dude, he was an Antifa, he recently converted to Islam, blah 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 blah, ISIS and this and that and the other. It's like, dude, you're just you're purposely confusing the masses and misdirecting people's attention, and that's what a lot of these hardcore conspiracy theorists have become. They've shifted away from what I guess they aim for, which is truth seeking, and they've actually become, people who cause confusion. They just immediately, as soon as something happens, it's like, it was a false flag. I don't have any fucking clue about the details or the evidence, or I don't have any fucking clue why I'm saying it's a false flag. I'm just saying it's a false flag because I want to say it, and because it has to be a false flag because I say so. It's like, dude, there's so many conspiracies out there that are completely genuine. I mean, we have 20 of them on the anti-media side. Go look at the 10 conspiracies that turned out to be true, and then 10 more conspiracies that turned out to be, like, we have 20 of them, and that's only scratching the surface of the genuine conspiracies that exist, that are proven, that we know of for sure. And there's hundreds of conspiracies going on right now as we speak, and a conspiracy, it's not as big as people like to make it out to be. All it is one or two, more than two people being in on a, some kind of plot to do something, bad, basically, more or less. I know it's kind of simplistic, but more or less that's what it is. There's a bunch of conspiracies happening right now. I'm sure there's some politician douchebag in some room somewhere right now meeting with some, pharmaceutical executive or some banker.
Yeah, they just dropped Chip.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's some conspiracy going on right now, but until you have proof of it or have a really good reason to suspect something, you're not really helping by just throwing it out there, hey, this is a false flag because I say so. It's like, dude, it's fine that you have an opinion, but don't act like it's a fact.
Yeah, don't take ISIS claiming responsibility and saying that he converted as a fact.
Yeah. And then,
we're talking about guys that use green screens, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like people, ISIS claims responsibility for it, and then people are like, oh, see, we told you he's a Muslim, blah, blah, blah. It's like, dude, ISIS takes responsibility for any time something like this happens.
It's like, dude, ISIS has like a budget for films. It's like, come on, dude, everything's propaganda. Do they really kill people, set them on fire and all that horrible shit? Hell yeah. But they make it for propaganda, and they make fake shit for propaganda. I mean, it's war, dude. It's like a culture war for these people. And it was probably for this guy too, but he went mentally ill. I figure he just couldn't handle what's going on with the country, and there's people that are breaking down. It's tough, man, what's going on. The end of an empire is a horrible thing to be a part of, but you're witness to a chance to be rebirthed like the Phoenix. If we can pull through this, we can actually get our republic back, not this corporation masquerading as one. And if people are breaking down, it's normal. It's normal when these changes in societal rifts are taking place. I don't think anybody, unless you're just wealthy, has any stability right now. So it's just what it is. We got to get through it.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. And, we've been talking about this the last several shows because, the decline of the American empire has been accelerating. And, of course, it's impossible to put a time on, a date on these things to happen. People have been saying, oh, the dollar is going to collapse and the economy is going to go to shit. Like, people have been crying wolf about that day after day, year after year. But it's easier to say, look, this is going to happen one day because, these things are inevitable. Like, it's easy to say, look, the U.S. empire, it's going to end. Because it is. Every empire that's ever existed has ended. It's going to end one day. We've been talking about this on the show more often as of late because I personally feel like it's coming along a lot faster than a lot of people expected with the rise of China and the election of Donald Trump and just the decline of American influence around the world, and at the very least, just the respect that countries have for us has pretty much gone away. And of course, last show we talked about the example of Syria and how Russia felt it had enough to work with to go and say, you know what, we're going to stand up right here in Syria. We draw the line. We're not going to let the U.S. cross this line. And they did it, and they won. They beat us. The fact that North Korea isn't bending at all, the fact that our allies in like the Philippines and stuff have been like, you know what, screw you guys, and we're going to work. Maybe we're going to work with China instead. And a lot of our allies around the world, especially in the Middle East, have been like, you know what, maybe the U.S. isn't so much of a, who we thought you guys were. And even Germany recently was like saying, yeah, maybe our relationship with the U.S. isn't what we thought it was. Maybe we need to look for new partners. And they even mentioned China. And so with all these things in mind,
that's how trade wars go hot, is when former allies turn their back on you because you have contraction blues is essentially what's going on. We overextended. I mean, every empire that has ever fallen has because they're overextended. And it doesn't matter what country it's in. China went through many dynasties. China's still China, and the Chinese Han people are still one people, and they've been for the last 7,000 years. So we can say China as an empire, as a nation, has lasted, and they've held together. But the big difference is they don't make colonies. And that's the biggest problem with the Western mindset and the slave circuit to our economy, which was built on primarily African slave trade that we don't need anymore. But you know what? The guys that ran that trade passed all the money and wealth down, and their kids are no better or different than they were. So that's where we're at now, man. It's not. There's not a problem with being a nationalist for the Republic of the United States as a country. If we all came together and gave everybody true equality, like most people that are born in a major big city like me and you, Nick, we understand there's differences in different races and cultures, but we also understand we can all live together if we just give each other respect. That's all you need. And it's held together by a lot of things, but one of them is the social contract. And that is held together by a threat of violence. If you screw with me, I'll blow you away. And that way kind of works. But the problem is America exports that everywhere, endlessly, like a giant parasite on the world. And now that we can't do that anymore, it's coming back here. That's what's happening, man. It's going to continue like a cycle until we break that cycle. We have to break the cycle and break out of this entire system somehow.
Yeah. And you brought up an interesting point about this guy. Maybe he snapped just because his way of life was going away. Like you said, the guy was like upper middle class. He recently bought a $400,000 home. You said he was a pilot. I'm not aware of these details, so I'm just taking your word on this. Had a plane.
Yeah, he had two planes, two small planes. He was a private, he had a private license.
Yeah, I mean, so, maybe this guy is one of these upper middle class dudes, and maybe he was starting to see his way of life slipping away from him, and maybe he was like, you know what, maybe it's damn Trump's fault, and this is the way he decided to, manifest his anger or his whatever, his depression, his sense of failing at life, whatever it is. Again, going back to what I was talking about at the beginning of the show, how America expresses itself through violence most of the time. Maybe this is just this guy's way of lashing out and saying, you know what, my life is going south. The state of the country sucks. I don't like Trump. Blah, 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 blah. And so I'm going to go and shoot up a bunch of country music fans. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me, right? But maybe through this dude's twisted mindset, this is what he, the way he saw it working out. Maybe he thought this.
It's insane, though. He's doing it like at the absolute worst possible time, which is why I think it's orchestrated. Because, with everything going on, this provides a smokescreen for Puerto Rico, for the gutting of the healthcare, for the horrible way they handled both Florida and Houston, which is still underwater. And I would love to get Bros on and ask him what the hell's really going on, because I'm hearing counts of like 10,000 people that passed away, and they haven't put any of that on the media. So I really want to know what's going on. And this is just the latest horrible atrocity to take our attention away from a long string of them. Let's blame Trump, even though Trump's just the mouthpiece for the people that are really pulling the strings. Let's not actually challenge them. Let's not challenge the system. Let's just complain and think that gun laws are going to make a difference when they're going to just keep pulling this shit because, let's be honest, there's at least 1 billion guns in the U.S., and at least 2/3 of them are unregistered. So you really think those are going to just disappear overnight? I mean, let's get real.
Yeah, we've gone from disaster to disaster to disaster, and it's getting pretty tiring, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because we've been talking about this over and over, right? About how the fall of the empire is going to affect the mindset of the U.S. because we've been under this this idea of American exceptionalism, right? Where it's America's number one, we're the best, we're no one can touch us, and we're the most powerful, we're the freest, we're the greatest country in the world, blah, 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 blah. We all know the sayings. We got our Pledge of Allegiance, we got our national anthem, and all that good stuff. But you bring up an interesting, idea here that this guy is trying to cope with the decline of the American empire and seeing, oh shit, it's not, the facade is starting to come down, right? We're starting to see through the outside layer. We're starting to see through the fakeness, the just false, American reputation that was built up inside of us through all this propaganda and through the news media, Hollywood, everything. It reinforces, the schooling system. It reinforces this American exceptionalist idea. And of course, it dates back to the early days of this country and, the manifest destiny and all that stuff. All those lies that we were told to basically wash over the fact that we're committing genocide against the native people and stealing property from the indigenous and all that stuff. All those lies have been built in and built up around us. And now we're finding out that it turns out over the last half century, they've been building this entire empire on a house of cards. And it's quickly falling apart. And, that's what I've been, wondering about is how is the decline of this empire going to be, how is it going to affect us mentally? People are going to have this reckoning where it's like, oh shit, like, damn, like, all the shit that I thought, all the shit I grew up on, pledging allegiance to, maybe that shit wasn't real. Maybe we've been going around the world exporting violence instead of exporting freedom and democracy. Maybe we've been going around the world not fighting terrorism, but creating it. Maybe we've been going around this country not fighting drugs, but creating a drug problem. Maybe we never ended slavery, but we actually just redefined it to include every race. People are going to start realizing all this stuff very, very quickly if they haven't already. And I'm worried about the impact of that's going to have on the mental status of many, many people in this country. The collective consciousness in this country is going to be, pretty interesting. It's going to be a journey, man, and we just got to be very careful. And what we need to do, and this is what I was preaching about at the beginning. We need to have a whole new outlook, a non-violent outlook on the American way of life. Because if we continue going this violent route where we solve everything with violence, we're going to keep having these shootings every single week. Probably every day. I wouldn't doubt if we had them every day. I mean, I know the rules are kind of loose, the definitions of how they define mass shootings. But last year there were so many. It was ridiculous. Like the amount of mass shootings last year was just unbelievable. I know that the fact checkers kind of had their way with those numbers because they weren't all fully accurate, but still, man, it was like some ridiculous, number of mass shootings that just keep happening. And what happens every time, dude? Every time it's the same thing. Oh, thoughts and prayers to Las Vegas. We need to start banning guns. We need to start banning Muslims. We need to start banning white people. I mean, it's the same thing every time. And then a few days later, it's like, okay, back to normal. What's Donald Trump saying on Twitter today? What foot is Hillary Clinton putting in her mouth today? What dumb shit is happening today? It is pretty frustrating to see this stuff keep happening over and over again. The same exact debates keep happening over and over again. The discussions never change. The only thing that changes are the politicians, the people that get killed, and the locations in which these things are happening. But the conversation stays the same. Nothing ever changes. And people just keep dying and people getting shot.
Yep. And I hate to be the devil's advocate, but I just couldn't see really any measure of layers of control stopping a guy in his position with the resources he would have. I mean, for God's sake, he could fly somewhere and come back with guns if he wanted to. So he didn't need to get them legally. It's just more convenient for him, and let's be honest, I don't think all those guns are going to end up being registered to him. I think a lot of them are going to be things he just was able to get with cash anywhere in Nevada. I mean, it's Vegas. So part of it is just the culture of the communities, the individual places we're talking about where these things are happening. A lot of them are lax. They are. I live in a state where it's extremely hunter-oriented, very friendly for legal firearms, but you have to go through a minimum process. Not every state has that. So do mass shootings happen here? They could. I haven't seen it yet. There's actually been a mass knifing here, of all things, but the potential is greater in states where they don't take extra care, and I think Nevada is now going to really clamp down. You're going to see the very first unrolling of the true police state, along with those towers in New York City.
I don't want to see the reaction, because that's what it is every time: problem, reaction, solution. And the last big gun control push is the one that we saw after Sandy Hook. And that was a really nasty attack, and a bunch of people died, a bunch of kids died and stuff, and they came close, pushing through some.
And sorry to interrupt, but if they ever do succeed with any, real clampdown, you can't reverse those things. So I'm just saying, whatever we give up, some of it we may need to give up some things, because some of these states, like I said, are too lax, but whatever we give up, it's going to be impossible to get it back. I'm just warning you, it's a slippery slope here. And it is leading to what they want, which is where basically only government-approved entities are going to be able to be armed. And they're just going to say, we don't approve you if you're a threat to us.
Governments and criminals, right? So one of the interesting things, too, that I realized today was that, Nevada just barely relaxed its rules on marijuana to now where it's legal recreationally in Las Vegas and elsewhere in Nevada. But for the longest time, weed was considered like, oh, well, no, you can't have weed. In fact, Vegas was known to have very, very strict drug laws where if you got caught even with like a seed, as of a couple years ago, that was basically a felony charge and you would go to jail. But on the other hand, guns are like, in Nevada, guns are like, dude, yeah, bro, you could have machine guns and you can go, and when you're in Vegas, you can go out to those shooting ranges and just go shoot all kinds of crazy weapons and stuff. And, this guy goes up there and he's able to kill over 50 people with weapons that are completely legal and in Nevada are considered pretty normal. I know here on the West Coast, in like the big cities and stuff, if you see a guy walking around holstering a weapon on his waistband, you would think, oh, that's kind of weird. We don't see that very often. But if you go to a place in the rural areas of Nevada, that's not exactly a big deal. You see that you would see that kind of thing all the time, as if you were out somewhere like in Texas or something. And so it's just another one of those things where there's a imbalance of legal going on elsewhere. Joining us now is our awesome editor-in-chief, Carrie Wedler. What's up, Carrie?
Hi, guys. Been listening to your show.
Welcome.
Thank you. I take it Justin's not going to make it on tonight, right?
No, Justin's having some technical issues with Skype, so we're going to try to get him on Wednesday.
Okay, for sure. Because I have one main thing I just wanted to say. I know you're sort of ending it, or will be soon. And there are definitely some things that don't add up. I don't want to speak too much on that because I've been discussing with Justin, and he's for sure the expert, so I don't want to be going off on things that I am not fully versed in. But the one thing I want to say is that no matter what you think of what happened here, is it a lone gunman? Probably unlikely, but, is it a false flag? Is it this, omnipotent they that we talk about, these people who run things? Whatever it is, whatever you think, something that I think we really need to be discussing, as a national conversation, is people's mental health. And I don't just mean they're popping pills. Sure, those things are associated with increased levels of violence, but I think what we really need to be discussing is the reason they're on the pills, and it's really interesting. I think that the empire is in free fall and people are just bugging out, that stabbing guy in Portland, the free speech guy who stabbed 2 people after he was harassing Muslims, or a Muslim and a black girl. Clearly he's got some issues, and clearly watching America, the facade of American greatness collapse, that is one of them. But I don't think that just because you're struggling with that, just because you're leaving angry comments, expressing your partisan ideology on Facebook, I don't think that's going to make you pull the trigger. I think it's something that's a lot deeper than that, and that we all struggle with. We're all human beings. We've all had trauma in our lives, and this is separate from the American empire. This is separate from the violent conditioning we get. This is something that speaks to just being human and to suffering and to having experiences that we don't know how to cope with when we're children or we're adolescents or we're, any age. And, this guy, if he did it, clearly he was struggling with some stuff. And I think that unless we start giving voice to that pain and that struggle and making it okay to feel those feelings, and even just learning how to feel them instead of numbing them with pharmaceuticals and whatever drug, alcohol, cigarettes, weed, even weed. I love weed, but even weed, as long as we keep running away from the things that are really eating it up and causing us so much turmoil, I really think we're going to keep seeing this. And I'm all about discussing militarism. If you look at the history of mass shootings, a lot of these people emulate the military. They were in the military. They were rejected by the military. This is a very strong pattern, but that alone I don't think is enough to make somebody a violent killer. I think you really need to be suffering. And even if you're a perpetrator of the false flags, even if you're Hillary Clinton, Hillary Clinton at some point in her life had some serious trauma to make her the person she is. And I just think that that's something we need to start considering. I just wanted to say that.
You better not be talking how to get Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, no, for real though.
Right. There's this perpetual cycle of fucked upness, I guess you could say, where, people, and I kind of briefly mentioned this at the beginning of the show, where, kids get beat by their parents and then they grow up and they think that solving issues is done by doing acts of violence. And they look around, they see the country doing the same thing, they see our government doing the same thing, they see our laws, they see our wars, they see the way we treat people. Everything is based around violence. And so when people in the United States especially, but this goes for people all around the world, but especially in the U.S., when they see things going not the way they'd like to see them, the first instinct, I think, in the United States is to lash out violently, because that's the way that everything happens around here. That's what makes this country work, is violence. Everything is backed up by violence here.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, one of my buddies he's a 45-year Vegas resident, so born and raised. So he's telling me this last week. Two suicidal people were both killed by police over the weekend. They were shot. 3 young boys were also ran over and killed before this tragedy in Vegas. He said Vegas seems to be busting apart at the seams. I've never seen it this bad. This is the problem, man. It's when the empire is coming down, the first place to go is the Sin City. I mean, the place is propped up by tourism and fake money. And I really do think this guy cracked up, and he was about to. I mean, he gambled away several tens of thousands. He sent a bunch to the Philippines, and then he did this act. And I don't know if he was a patsy or not, but all I'm trying to say is that the cracks are forming, and this is just one of the places that you can expect that you're going to see these things happen first.
Well, yeah, and people go to Vegas, and I'm not saying all people. Like, I've been to Vegas; it's fun, but like a lot of the time, you're going to get, like, excuse my language, you're going to get fucked up. You're going to escape. You're going to like leave reality for a while, and it's. You know, we talk about this culture of violence, and that's totally it. And coinciding with that is a total lack of love. Like, you have suicidal people. You have people who don't, you know, there's studies that, like, if you don't get enough affection as a baby, you're more predisposed to violence. And we have this culture of, like, not accepting ourselves. If nothing is good enough, there's always something to do to improve yourself. Like, there's so much lack. There's no self-compassion. There's very little self-care. And then you combine that with this view that violence is the solution to everything. And like Nick said, like, are we really surprised that we're seeing this? But I really do believe it isn't just the culture of violence. It isn't just that everything is backed up by violence, that we glorify violence. It's like a very strong sense of not loving ourselves. And it comes down to an individual level. Like, think of this guy. Let's say that this guy, it's just him. It's all him. He cracked up. I think he did. He grew up without a dad. He grew up believing that his father was a horrible person. What is that like for a kid to grow up without a father? You know, like that, you carry that with you your whole life if you never cope with it. And it's, you know, it's psychological stuff. And we can talk about SSRIs, and that's a huge factor. But again, like I said, like, why is someone numbing their pain to begin with? I think that's the root of what we need to start dealing with. And I don't have every solution to deal with that, but we got to do some introspection. Like, a lot of these problems are external, but a lot of them are also internal. And you can see that with people screaming at each other right now in reaction to the tragedy. Like, everybody's so hateful. Everybody's so mad. Nobody knows how to deal with their emotions. And it's something we all need to learn. We need some coping mechanisms.
Yeah, there's this perpetual cycle of people just being messed up. Like, you know, they get treated bad as a kid. There's some trauma there, and they cover it up because in our society, you know, Americans are supposed to be macho. We're supposed to, you know, be the ass kickers of the world. We don't take no shit from anybody, supposedly. And so we're supposed to cover up any kind of emotional issues that we have, psychological issues, with, you know, patriotism, more or less. And, you know, you're supposed to suck it up, shut the hell up, and just do your job, do your thing, and you know, pretend like you're not feeling bad, or don't deal with it. And so, you know, of course, more recently, people have been more inclined to start bringing these issues up and start talking about them. I think Derek Bros and John Vibes have done a great job with, you know, talking about the first step in healing ourselves from a political standpoint is healing ourselves personally. And I think, you know, it's a great point that you brought up, Carrie, is that there's a bunch of just individual pain that's going on, not physical pain, but psychological, and it leads to like this collective psychosis where everybody's kind of just weird. I don't know how to say it, but there's just so many people, so many issues, and there's so many people on drugs and so many people diagnosed with all these things going on. It just seems so strange, and it's like we're, instead of coping with things, we're just covering them up with drugs and pretending they're not happening, covering them up with like patriotism and money and success and all that stuff.
And that's also, it's not to say that some people aren't born psychopaths. Like, there are some seriously just like people who are lacking things, you know, like they don't have the capacity to feel empathy, but, you know, and there's probably a higher proportion of those people in government and politics and, you know, running corporations. But overall, I think, I mean, this is just me, and maybe I just have to tell myself this to keep going and doing what I do, but I genuinely believe that most people are good. Whatever they're struggling with, like whatever pain they're in, however they might lash out. Like, I wrote an article today just about how much people are helping. Like, when the attack was happening, there were people shielding each other and like helping them escape and driving them to the hospital. And now they're donating blood and they're donating money. Like, you look at the hurricanes, people want to help. And that's why I keep going. As much as things are really depressing right now, and like there's just violence and so much struggle and so much discord, and people seem to hate each other. I think at our core, like we want to help each other. There's that great Charlie Chaplin speech from The Great Dictator, and he's like, humans are like that. Like we want to live by each other's happiness, not misery. And as really hard as it is to be optimistic right now, it's still like I went through this experience myself where I was like just lashing out at the world. As much as I wanted peace, I was lashing out. I was suffering. Like I was unhappy myself, and I was just throwing it out into the world and then being surprised when I was getting anger and hatred back. So I've had to really learn how to reshape my message and be positive and like take care of myself before I can help others. And it's not an easy thing to do, and I'm by no means an expert, but I've seen the difference in how I'm able to express myself and like deal with other people's anger at me. And I think we would all benefit from just taking a few moments every day to go inward and like really just love ourselves, which is a lot easier said than done, but I think it is vital to healing our planet.
Well, that's great advice, and probably advice I need to take because I'm still an asshole to people online. Can't stand these assholes, to be honest.
One thing you can slam any Trumper with right now is that, he could reverse a lot of these problems if we'd stop pumping so much money into the military and start rebuilding the infrastructure like he said he would during his campaign, and if people would just call him out on it and just really slam him with it, because we put an extra $100 billion into the military, and that would have been a nice start to at least put people back to work and get some more money into the economy and get it pumped up and flowing again. Because all the stuff he's saying about the Dow and everything, that's all helping him and his cronies and his buddies and all the millionaires in the world. But regular people are still slowly dying an economic death in this country, and it's just not going to last, man. I don't know if this guy was that guy, but it fits that mold, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting. It's definitely an interesting discussion. The question I want to just throw out there to you, Carrie, is: do you think that these Trump supporters? Because look, we already know that the people on the supposed left are kind of open to the idea of more gun control or advocating it directly. I mean, we saw Hillary Clinton advocating it already today. Recently, there was a story about how the feds were sent into Chicago to help confiscate guns from supposed gang members. And the people that are typically up in arms, no pun intended, about gun control and stuff were like cheering it on. They're like, yeah, we need to get guns out of those gang members' hands. I mean, let's not pretend this is not a racial issue. They're going in the inner city of Chicago to take guns away from gang members, supposedly. The conservatives were actually cheering it on, when if Obama would have been doing it, they would have been like, oh, hell no, that's a gun grab. Obama's going after the guns. We can't let this happen. The NRA didn't say anything about it. Do you think people are caught up so much in this partisanship that they would actually be like, oh, Trump wants to take away gun rights from certain people? Sure, I'm all for it if a Republican's doing it. I mean, do you think people are that caught up in their partisanship or no? I mean, we only have 1 minute, though. I
mean, okay, I don't want to collectivize all people, so I'm not going to do that. But I think there are a lot of people who would be totally fine with it. And to me, that's the dangers of democracy, because you get so caught up in being in power and in having your master be in control that you're willing to make excuses and you're willing to sacrifice your principles. And we saw it happen, like you just said, in Chicago, where people were fine with it. The whole point is that, shall not be infringed. That's their whole, that's what they always say. No, you can't have my guns at all. It's the Constitution, but no problem violating any of the other amendments. And so is it really surprising that they're going to be okay with this? I mean, I know that there are some cops that say they won't do gun grabs and they won't take people's guns, but there are plenty of order followers who will. And, I've been saying lately, well, what's the point in stockpiling weapons against this government? If the people you support, the cops, are the ones who are taking the guns, if you're just going to hand them over because you trust the cops, the logic is not adding up here. And I believe that statism turns people's brains to mush, and we see it happening on both sides of the aisle.
And like I said before the show ends, there's at least double as many unregistered firearms as registered, and there's 300 million registered firearms.
Yeah, there's a lot of guns out there, so we're gonna have to see what happens. Hopefully, hopefully Trump doesn't flip the script here and go for the one last final gun grab and get the conservatives on board with it. We'll see what happens. Anyway, we're coming up to the end. Thank you guys for joining me here on the Anti-Media Radio. We'll be back on Wednesday, hopefully with Justin King to talk a little bit more, and by then we'll probably know some more details about the shooter and all the situation surrounding what's going on.